Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank the panelists again and the speakers from the audience. Now I think we can give us like two minutes to take our seats there. And I'm going to invite our host here, the ambassador, Mr. Botnaru. You have to take them. No, we have to tell them to take the names.
No, it's okay. I will be under this name. Fine. Good evening. My name is Botnaru. I'm director of GA division here. I have a feeling that I've been at the meeting of the government of the very new, smart, intelligent, modern, of the pro-European country. I saw the morning panel here and distinguished representatives in the hall. Well, here is the government already ready, and I'm optimistic. The new generation of Moldovans will make it. There will be no failure. I'm pretty sure. Just a few words. First of all, as I said, new generation will not fail. After today's discussion, I'm even more optimistic. What impressed me, there was no search or name of quick, fast decisions. That's encouraging. These processes takes time. We have UN peacekeeping operations in countries for 15, some 20 years. The United Nations, the whole world, and they cannot solve the problem. Or it is fixed somewhere, and then you have Burundi. You fixed Ebola there, then you have another failed state there. And UN couldn't prevent Ukraine, right? So this is all the expertise, all the knowledge of the backing from the whole world. So please keep this in mind. I don't think we are a failed state, though sometimes you have this feeling. Look, this is, and I fully agree with Vyacheslav, this is a process. And no way you see this, how assiduous is this process than here at the UN, where you have plenty of examples, positive and negative. We didn't ask for a peacekeeping operation, if you make by comparison, right? We didn't have we are not in a civil war. We didn't have time, or at least when I was in the foreign ministry, that I will go to the airport to bid farewell to a delegation and then wait until the evening, until we meet another delegation to take it to the foreign ministry, because we didn't have fuel to drive the car. But there were colleagues in other former Soviet republics. So we didn't went through the worst days. But that doesn't mean that what is happening is acceptable. And this pushing, this feeling that we are somehow late in the process, I think it is positive. But at the same time, it takes efforts and proposals and ideas and real support was seen and heard here today in this hall. It was really a discussion that is worth taking place at the United Nations headquarters. And I want to say congratulations. Just to thank the organizers of this convention. I must tell you that we at the UN, if we will organize something similar, it will take at least 3 months and a lot of departments involved. So they succeeded in doing it. The participants, and I want to salute here also on behalf of this building, Minister Sandu, Ambassador Lupan, who is not a visitor here, of course, Ambassador Kushba, other colleagues, especially those who traveled from Moldova. I know this is some sacrifice and we really appreciate. My presentation should have been about UN, what the UN support can be, how UN can help, and so on. All of this information is very much available. But if the government, all they can do in order to use the UN potential, UN, and when I'm saying UN, it's not just United Nations, but it's the whole UN system. And here you have plenty of agencies, programs, and funds, and they just have so they are paying so much importance to this institution that they are sending just 2 or 3 diplomats only to deal with millions of questions. Then there is a problem in the capital, probably. I'm sorry, Ambassador, don't complain on me. That's my personal view, also as a former ambassador. So instead of talking about what UN can do, because UN can do, but UN, it's membership, it's member states. Instead of this, I was thinking that maybe I should invite a colleague, because today there were questions how to do, not only what, but how to do. So I have a colleague here who can share with us their experience on how and what to do. And this is the former permanent representative of Georgia to the United Nations. Now he is a senior political affairs officer in my division. He is dealing with disarmament. He was the member of that team that kindly invited President Shevardnadze to step down and give the way to the new guys who know what to do. He was also Secretary of the National Security Council during those difficult days in 2008. Also Minister of Education and Science, Minister Sandu, you may know him from that time, no, who really championed the challenging task of reforming an ideology-driven Soviet type of educational system. And I know he was mentioned by the World Bank with the reforms that they did in Georgia. So, Ambassador Lomaia, if you will please share with us some moments from your experience that you think will be useful for the audience in order to support those thoughts that were expressed here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Botnaru, it is a privilege indeed to be given an opportunity to speak to such a brilliant audience representing a brotherly country of the Republic of Moldova. Since I've just been asked to join in, I'm afraid you won't hear from me a well thought through presentation on the subject of today's discussion. What I have is rather a loosely connected set of observations and thinking aloud, but mostly reflections on my own experience of public sector reform in Georgia from 2003 all the way up to 2012. Thinking about Moldova and Georgia, one can see obvious differences in geography, language, history, culture, the type of economy, and the neighborhood. However, there are striking similarities too, such as the relatively small populations, the size of economies, but also in history, geography, and the neighborhood too. To start with, both of the countries have problems of illegal foreign military presence in their territories and resulting issues for their national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So this is why, when talking about reforms, one has to keep in mind a factor of an additional complexity that the foreign military presence adds up. But what we have learned from our experience, maybe I can distill it down to 3 major lessons. But before I get to that lessons, I just wanted to give you a very, very brief update of where we were back in 2003 when a popular movement lately called the Rose Revolution swept a new government into power through a peaceful transition of power, bloodless and peaceful transition of power. Back then, in 2003, GDP per capita in Georgia stood at $900 per person. Georgia was among the most corrupt countries according to the Corruption Perception Index by the Transparency International. We stood at 136 place in their ranking of maybe 160 countries, next to Nigeria and Russia. I was the member of the first cabinet of President Saakashvili as the Minister of Education. So what I've inherited was 24 months of unpaid wages and salaries for our teachers in about 3,000 schools. As low as the salaries were, and they stood at maybe $20 a month, still 24 months of unpaid wages and salaries. My colleague in the Ministry of Defense found that there were only resources left for 3 days of operation of whatever the armed forces of Georgia represented back then. Corruption was, I've heard, I listened carefully to the panel discussion this morning, and lots of similar words and grievances like endemic corruption. Corruption for Georgia and Georgians some 13 years ago was just a way of life, and especially when it comes to education, but I also heard in traffic police, education, and healthcare services. But I can attest to education. According to a research by the World Bank dated 2002, as many as 85% of all the students admitted to universities were admitted based on connections and bribes rather than their knowledge and fairness of admission procedure. 85%. So 85 of every 100 students were there not because they knew more than the others. So it just gives you a complete collapse of almost all public services. Most visibly in police, prosecutor's office, like I said, education, healthcare sector, and traffic, traffic police and legal services. So those were the times. So so the 3 major lessons: we had to be bold, we had to be decisive, and we had to be positive. When I say about being bold, I say that, and my senior colleague, Ambassador Botnaru, would excuse me, we didn't have time to be incremental, to come up with an incremental program of reform. We had to change everything at once. So that was the situation with the traffic police when we fired all 50,000 traffic policemen overnight, and we rehired them through a highly selective system where international presence was in the selection committees to build a trust toward the selection system. When it comes to education sector, and I'll bring just 3 examples: traffic police, the university entrance examination, and public services. The entrance examination, like I said, bribing was a part of the culture of the way the universities were run. In April, the tourist agencies that were in charge of carrying tourists from Georgia to some southern resorts were full of orders, mostly coming from the admission committees of the universities. So they knew far ahead what amount of bribe they would have planned for to carry their entire families and maybe neighborhoods or circles of friends to places like Antalya or even Sharm el-Sheikh or somewhere else. So there were estimates of millions and millions of bribes given and taken during entrance examination. So what we did was a sweeping reform agenda where we stripped the universities of the right of admitting students, instead giving it to a newly created National Examination Authority. We introduced a law which was not perfect at all. And it took many years afterwards to perfect it and better and improve it. But the major thing for us was to get rid to rupture with the old system of entrance examination. So we established the new institution. We came up with a system very similar to SATs, but unlike SATs, the points accrued at SATs were the only entrance tickets to the universities. So the universities had and still have no say in admitting their students, to their faculties. It's done exclusively through the National Examination Authority. The way we instill trust into examination authority is a heavy presence of foreigners. We had foreigners as our counselors. The World Bank provided for that, and the World Bank, other financial institutions will be happy to provide for that. The decisions makers were Georgians. However, the design of the system was prepared by the foreigners, and that helped to gain trust, to win the reliability and trustworthiness to the entire system. And so from 85% of corruption during entrance, we went down to 0 overnight. In a year, it was gone. It wasn't there. And thanks God, this is one of the legacies that we've left behind. There's another government in power now which is not friendly to the government that I represented, and much more friendlier to the northern neighbors. But amongst several things that they didn't touch and they benefited from is the system of the university entrance examination, where we have a 100% trust of the public and 0% of corruption, both in reality and in perception. Traffic police, like I said, from being one of the most hated segments of society, gaishniki, if you will, they became one of the most respected segments of society, and we did it through these drastic, one might say draconian measures of firing the entire force, and then rehiring them through a competitive procedures. But we also borrowed money and expertise from abroad, and we put them through a very tough training, tough both mentally and physically. We re-equip them with new cars and new, ammunition and everything, and probably we even a little bit overdid it, because these days, even when there is a domestic fight in a home, they tend to call to traffic police, to come and help them sort it out. But this is just to illustrate the level of trust the general public, invested into that. And don't tell me that, the general public wouldn't follow you. And there is a cynicism, and there is, this overall skepticism towards the government. Once they see reliable, tangible results, and you have to come with one pretty quickly. And this is, I think it was Mr. Visitanu, if I'm visit you this morning at this panel, who said that, yes, sir, who said something which is very, very dear to me. As important as elitist corruption is, the petty corruption may be even more important, because it's something many of you may have heard. This is a broken windows theory introduced by a famous American political scientist, James Q. Wilson. It's a criminological theory of the norm setting and signal effect of urban disorder and of vandalism on additional crime and antisocial behavior. The theory states that maintaining living environments to prevent small crimes from happening, such as even window breaking, helps to create an atmosphere of order and lawfulness. You can easily apply that to corruption. Once you get rid of corrupted gaishniki, once you get rid of corrupted admission, commission at entrance examination, you create an entire new atmosphere within society, the one you can build on to reach out to higher level of tasks. And these levels are very important as a stepping stone, as a trampoline, which catapults you to a higher level of complexity in your tasks. So, so that's about being decisive. And the third and final lesson I wanted to share with you is to create a positive vision of your country. As I listened to the panelists, and I was really, really impressed with the level of sophistication and education and dedication to their own country. But what struck me is maybe too many pessimistic scenarios, like falling over the cliff, as true as they may be, or seeking for a parachute, or having a patient in a coma and trying to perform a surgery. As like I said, as good as these metaphors may be, one has to come up with a positive vision for your society and for your beautiful country. And in doing so, you have to, and I think this audience has a clear-cut potential to do so, has to identify a possible developmental models for your country. There are not very many available in the world. There are countries that are mostly based on cheap labor. There are other countries that are mostly based on natural resources, including in our shared neighborhood. We have a very big country with that has 2/3 of its income dependent on natural resources, and there are countries that have based their economies on knowledge economy. So. And there may be some combination of these, but what is a model for development for Moldova, a truly European country? That is something which you know, intellectuals like you in this audience may elaborate and present as a positive, 100% positive European type of vision for your country. You know, what is the Moldova that you know, in 2030, in 2050? I mean, something within your reach, something within the reach of your generation. You know, without having a very clear positive image, it will be really difficult, you know, to change this apathy among general population, you know, to change this climate of, you know, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change, you know, that's the way we are. I mean, the politicians do not care for us, etc., etc. So I think in doing so, Moldova can and should tap into the resources of this audience. There are not very many Moldovans that I know, regrettably to me, but I'm improving. But they are people, but all of them, all of the people that I know are high-quality professionals, very respected in their communities. Just to name a few, we have Ambassador Lupan, one of the most efficient, you know, permanent representatives here at the United Nations. We have Ambassador, my dear friend, Alessandro Kuzba, former ambassador of your country to the United Nations, now a leader of an influential NGO. And we have Ambassador Botnaru, last but not least at all. I mean, a person from our region who we consider one of our representatives on many countries from the former Soviet Union. And I think Moldova can ignore their experience and professionalism, but it can only do it at its own peril. I think here in this audience, you have ample intellectual resources and international experience that would help you to transform your country before you know it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexa. This is a privilege of being the boss. You pick somebody from your office in the morning and say you will speak at 3 o'clock because I was busy. So really, he didn't have time to prepare very much. But anyway, I think some lessons learned that we really can use. So we have, there is the capacity. There is a very beautiful, hardworking, smart people in the Republic of Moldova. There is the expertise at home and abroad, and you are representing here. So let's hope for really a better future, and all together, and each of one to do as much as possible so we get more and more positive news from Chisinau, from Moldova, from Europe, and so on. So before concluding, we prepared a small surprise for you. We will invite you to have a quick visit of the General Assembly Hall. This is a historic place. This is a very historic place when on the 2nd of March 1992, the huge delegation of Moldova, led by President Snegur, and I'm saying huge because there were only 3 people, and I was the number 3, entered the GA Hall. The President was introduced, and the resolution of the General Assembly was adopted that the Republic of Moldova becomes member of the family of the United Nations. A very historic place. So you'll have the possibility to take pictures, to see who is sitting where, and so on. But